October 1927. Tonight, a new film will open in New York. A special audience has been invited to come and see it and experience a dramatic innovation that the producers hope will change the whole future of the cinema. The jazz singer starts without synchronized sound. The audience follows what the actors are saying from caption cards. Then halfway through comes the moment everyone's waiting for.
Wait a minute. You ain't heard nothing yet. Wait a minute, I tell you. You ain't heard nothing. You want to hear Toot Toot Tootsie? All right, hold on. No, listen. Toot Toot Tootsie, goodbye. Toot Toot Tootsie, don't cry. The little choo-choo train that takes me away from you. You don't know just how sad it makes me. Kiss me pretty and then, ow.
The talking picture is an immediate sensation.
It was just awe-inspiring to listen to Al Jolson singing on the film and also hear him. And a number of people just cheered and clapped too at that time when he did come on.
Millions already go to the cinema as their main form of entertainment. With the arrival of sound, the mass appeal of the movies will grow. All over the world, more people will find an escape from their daily lives at the cinema. Film's ability to enthrall and entertain, to persuade and to seduce, will be greater than ever. The first time people had paid to see pictures move was in Paris, just over 30 years before. At first, they found it marvel enough to watch everyday domestic scenes. But the simple, close-to-home films were just the beginning. Audiences were at the start of an extraordinary journey. In the new century, the system of lights and lenses that started as a curiosity was to transport millions into a different world of the imagination. Films had their earliest impact in poor city neighborhoods because they were cheap to watch. At first, they were included between the acts at variety theaters. But soon the new movies became substitutes for what could still be seen live at a higher price. A new audience could afford to watch daring young women take risks on the trapeze. And magicians who made them gasp. As filmmakers mastered their craft, they found they could enhance that magic. By 1910, there were over 10,000 Nickelodeons across the United States and Europe. In America alone, 26 million people watched movies each week. Abe Lass went to Nickelodeons in New York.
The silent movie house was the great escape. It was 3 for a dime. It was worth $3 million rather than 3 cents. The excitement and the escape that it provided. It was a dimension of our lives which were pretty constricted and pretty limited and pretty unimaginative and pretty unromantic. And here we found everything.
Films of the San Francisco earthquake were rushed to the Nickelodeons. At a time when few had traveled out of their own communities, they could see a wider world. But what people wanted most was stories, melodramas and adventures with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Caption cards were a problem for slow readers or those who couldn't read at all. As a boy, Luigi Cavalieri helped run a projector in Rome.
Erano giocattoli tutte macchine di proiezione, era una cosa così artigianale.
They were more like toys than projectors. They were simple devices you worked by hand. There was a small crank that had to be turned. If it was a film with captions, you had to turn it slowly, otherwise nobody could read it. The children would shout, "Go slower," and you had to make the children happy.
Silent films were international. No matter where they were made, anyone could understand them. Before the First World War, films were being produced in 25 countries. Studios from Sweden to Italy, France to the United States, competing to supply one another's audiences. No one nation dominated. Filmmaking spread to India, as well as China and Japan. Based on a Hindu myth, the first Indian film was completed in Bombay in 1913. For Indian audiences, it could be disturbing to see the traditional stories of the gods that they'd heard so often taking place before their eyes. Rajan Ramanathan lived near Bangalore.
It was as though God actually appeared in front of us. My grandmother would even pat her cheeks as penance whenever Krishna or Rama came onto the screen. We were fascinated by the cinema. It was amazing to see pictures dancing on the screen. It was our biggest excitement.
Around the world, a generation of children were the first to grow up with the cinema. Elizabeth Finn was a regular at her local picture house in West London.
The cinema was really an extension of our reading. It was stories. And it was great excitement. The biggest threat was if you don't behave yourself, you won't be allowed to go to the pictures on Saturday.
The music that accompanied the films was played by pianists like Rita Kay.
Where I was sitting, I could only get a sort of a side view of the film. We did try to fit the scenes with the appropriate music to give you the feeling that it fitted. And for instance, for a love theme, I would do something like this. Now, the next thing I think would be for a villain. There's always villains in the films, in the silent films. The short comedy films, we usually did something a bit jazzy, just to give you that little lift. Here goes.
By the end of the First World War, Europe was exhausted and the making of films had stopped. With so much to rebuild, films were a low priority. But in America, in the ideal climate of California, a powerful new force had been born in Hollywood. American filmmaking mushroomed to supply the huge home market. New studios were built, and directors like D.W. Griffith made ever more expensive and spectacular films. Way Down East was filmed on location in 1920. Close-ups were used to increase the audience's emotional involvement. In the 1920s, the making of celluloid dreams was industrialized. Hollywood exported more and more of its pictures, and with them went American values and the American dream. Comedies like The Gold Rush, with their visual humor, could be appreciated everywhere. International audiences found it easy to identify with Charlie Chaplin's Little Tramp as he faced the uncertainties of life.
We loved Charlie Chaplin, we adored him. And we literally were rolling on the floor with laughing, screaming with laughing. It was so funny.
Crowds flocked to the cinemas on the basis of Chaplin's name alone. He became as popular in Europe as he was in the United States. He was mobbed when he came back to London in 1921.
Oh, he was a great star then. Everybody said that as he was a British, he was born in England, he should have been made a knight. And my mother said, I'd make him king.
That year, Chaplin earned $1.5 million. This was a new sort of fame. He said, I am known in parts of the world that have never heard of Jesus Christ. Even in the new Soviet Union, Chaplin was a star. A Russian dance company paid him the compliment of mass imitation. And Hollywood's capacity to create stars was proof of the movie's new power. The studios used publicity in new ways to promote the actors they'd invested in. Millions of people were encouraged to follow the carefully orchestrated lives of a small group of actors and actresses. One couple became the ultimate symbol of glamour, living together at Pickfair, their estate in Beverly Hills. Each was already successful as an actor in their own right. When Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford married, they were portrayed as a new form of royalty. Their lifestyle was beyond the aspirations of most of the audience. Lisetta Salis was in Rome.
Tutti questi film che venivano dall'America ci
all these American films were entertaining.
At
the same time, they made us feel backward, because the people in the films were wealthy, successful, happy and well-dressed. They made us feel wretched because we were poorer and less elegant.
But from the stars, people learned how to behave, how to smoke a cigarette. Audiences from Brazil to Germany studied the cars they drove and the luxurious homes they lived in. The cut of the stars' suits was scrutinized by tailors in Japan so they could make the clothes customers now demanded.
I remember the femme fatales thinking about their great loves and misfortunes. Many Italian girls tried to imitate them, to be femme fatales.
Women followed the way the stars did their hair. Kathleen Green was growing up in South Wales.
We all longed for golden curls, and I had a very short crop, which didn't suit me at all. So later on in life, I went for curls myself, and like a lot of other girls, we all, lots of curls, shoulder-length hair, and dressed ourselves up like the film stars.
For in my dreams I'm jealous of you.
Magazines suggested their readers could enter the glamorous world of the stars just by using the cosmetics they endorsed. In Britain, a cinema chain ran a contest with a film contract as first prize. But the road from Cricklewood, where the finals were held, to Hollywood was a long one. The winners did not find fame, but for a moment they could dream it was possible to appear opposite their idols.
I'm the king of Araby. world belongs to me. At night.
By the mid-1920s, Rudolph Valentino had emerged as the screen's greatest lover.
I'll free the stars that shine above.
For young men, his films gave unprecedented lessons in romantic behavior. George Williams learnt about seduction at his local cinema in East London.
What I did watch was the kissing technique of the hero with his girlfriend. I thought to myself I would pick up a few tips from this of this sort of technique for later on, for the time when I got fed up with football. And this might come in handy at a later date.
In the film Sherlock Jr., Buster Keaton played a shy cinema projectionist wanting to kiss his girlfriend but unable to get up the courage. Like many in the real-life audiences, Keaton looked to the screen to learn how. Inside the cinemas, audiences were able to behave as they couldn't elsewhere. Franco Ricci was in Italy.
We didn't have cars as they were very rare. It was risky to kiss someone in public because you could be fined or even arrested for a simple kiss in the street. So our refuge was the cinema.
E allora il rifugio nostro è il cinema.
An awful lot in 7 reels. Take your lessons at the movies and have love scenes of your own. When the picture's over and it's time to leave, don't forget to brush the powder off your sleeve. Take your girl into the movies if you come to make love at home.
The advance of the movies seemed a threat to the many church groups and politicians who wanted to be guardians of public decency. They feared a mass moral rot was setting in. In America, a commission was appointed under William Hayes to clean up the film industry's morals and standards. Arthur Abales's family ran a cinema.
They had the Hayes Commission. He used to be a postmaster general, and he drew up a list of things that you could and could not do. One of the things was there could be no kisses with 2 people in bed together, even if they were husband and wife. The man always had to have 1 foot on the ground.
The removal of anything explicit confused some young cinema-goers.
Because there was one film and a man was seen coming out of this woman's bedroom, and in the film there was the most awful fuss. So we couldn't make out what the fuss was about. And we decided between ourselves that he'd gone to bed with his boots on. It must have been that. Couldn't think of anything else to cause such a fuss.
Other countries followed, setting up boards of film censors to view each film before release and dictate changes. Their detailed rulings tried to eliminate any trace of eroticism. But just occasionally, some directors proved they could obey all the censor's rules and still rouse the audience. With the spread of radio in America in the late 1920s, people had a new alternative to the movies, and it was free. Fearing people would now stay at home, the film companies raced to perfect the invention which they hoped would keep their audiences: films with sound. When the first successful system was launched with The Jazz Singer in 1927, the impact was as great as they'd hoped, not just in America, but around the world.
On the stage, with this show, I'm going to sing it jazzy. Now get this. Blue skies, smiling at me, me, nothing but little blue skies. Do I see? Do.
Questo canto, questa musica.
The singing, the music, this voice coming from the screen. The sound was so moving.
Era dal suono così emozionante.
We kept saying to each other, let's watch it again, let's watch it again.
E restiamo ancora una volta.
We watched the film 2 more times.
Siamo stati a rivedere questo film.
You like that, Mama? I'm glad of it. I'd rather please you than anybody I know of. Oh, darling.
The days of one international screen language were over. And even in Britain, people who thought they shared the same language were surprised.
Oh, I'm going to steal something.
We'd not heard American accents. We couldn't understand them at first. After a while we got used to it. And then we all said, oh yeah, and says you, and you ain't heard nothing yet. We were all doing this sort of thing. We got used to it. But it was as strange to us at the beginning as a foreign language.
Rita Kay in Scotland became a casualty of progress.
When the talkies arrived, this was a terrible blow for all musicians, including myself, because virtually I was only 18 then when the talkies took over in my cinema, and I felt I had only just got started. I had only just done a few years, and I felt really lost and didn't really know what was going to happen with the talkies putting us all out of work.
But there were other jobs to be had in the lavish new cinemas that were now being built. John Anderson worked in Boston.
Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, there were an enormous number of people that came into the Metropolitan Theater because it was a showplace of New England. And they had staff of probably 30 or 40 ushers in the theater. It was just awe-inspiring to see the theater itself, look up at the beautiful paintings on the stage. There was a painting of an Egyptian queen, and it was rumored that she had a diamond in her head.
Films were more popular than ever. In Britain, the distributors also encouraged the construction of new, larger cinemas equipped for sound. By 1930, 25 million Britons were going to the cinema each week.
Britain's super cinema is the Gaumont State at Kilburn, built to provide millions of Londoners and visitors from all over the world with the last word in luxurious entertainment. Inside the main entrance hall is the first wonder, a magnificent candelabra, a replica of the electrical fitting in the ballroom at Buckingham Palace.
At the grandest picture palaces, audiences entered a fantasy world even before the film began. Many walked on carpet for the first time. The new cinemas were the most advanced buildings of their age. They took a respectable place in the center of every city and town.